Welcome to the Freelance Journalism Podcast. Today's episode is about thinking about freelancing beyond just writing to include social media management or consulting and strategy, even building your own agency. And Shernay, I thought you were the perfect host for this guest because of all that might unlock for you. So what resonated?
Yes, I was excited for this conversation because, as you may know, Catherine, I started a content agency back in the day, a few years ago. So it's exciting to talk to other people who are building agencies and looking at freelancing as a way to really branch out and try all these different things that you are capable of doing. So I hope that you enjoy this conversation.
Hello, welcome to the podcast. My name is Shernay Williams. I'm one of the co-hosts here. I'm an independent video journalist based in Baltimore. And this podcast is brought to you by the Institute for Independent Journalists. And our goal is to advocate for the financial and emotional sustainability of freelancers of color. And we have a guest here today. We have Adriana Lacy. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm excited to speak with you because, for one, we have a lot in common, but also your story really testifies to all the skills that we have as journalists and how we can apply them in so many different ways outside of the newsroom. So just to get into your background, you are an award-winning journalist and the founder of Adriana Lacy Consulting, which is a digital consulting firm that helps businesses expand their audiences. You were named a Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree for your creation of Journalism Mentors, which is a platform to advance early career journalists. And you're an adjunct lecturer at Brandeis University. And you honed your skills at Axios, the Los Angeles Times, and the New York Times. So, let's start there. How did you get into journalism? And then how did you get into freelancing?
Yes, that's such a great question. It's very interesting. I feel like I had a bit of an interesting kind of entry to journalism because I have never actually had a straightforward reporter role. Since I was kind of in college, I've been always in this kind of digital social media content space. And I've always had roles that were, social media editor, audience engagement editor, roles that, really didn't appear in journalism, 5, 10, 15 years ago. These are sooner jobs and newer jobs. I went to Penn State for undergrad, and I actually thought I was going to be a teacher, specifically an elementary school teacher. I was very interested in education. And while I was there, I think it was my freshman year, actually, I went to a talk with Soledad O'Brien. She was on campus, and she really was talking about just the importance of marginalized voices kind of having a seat at the table when it comes to news and reporting. And it really struck me and made me think about my career, especially on campus. I felt like a lot of students, especially students of color, weren't being represented in the campus newspaper, and it inspired me to start a digital publication at Penn State that really covered a lot of this news. So focusing on students of color at Penn State, international students, and really just students who, have a very different background than the majority of folks who were on campus. And by doing that, I kind of really just fell in love with journalism and ended up switching my major to journalism and started doing that sort of work. Had an internship at Axios as a social media editor. After college, I got an internship at the New York Times and stayed there for an additional year as a news assistant, doing a lot of work with SEO and audience, and also worked at the Los Angeles Times, worked at Axios again, and I did a lot of freelancing on the side and realized how much I loved kind of just the hustle and bustle of kind of doing more freelance work than necessarily a traditional newsroom, and made the decision about a year ago to kind of go full-time freelance, and have been really lucky to just work with so many great organizations, both kind of in the journalism field and outside of it.
Wow. So listen, I love Soledad O'Brien, one of my mentors from afar.
Yeah.
So yes, I completely agree with all of that. And so it's been a year, you said, with freelancing.
Yeah, a year as of April.
Okay, that's great. And so can you kind of get into what you've been doing in this past year?
Yes, that's such a great question. So a lot of it has been, the unglamorous things of just figuring out, taxes, finances, and how to do a lot of these skills. I think a lot of times in journalism, we're trained, especially in journalism school, how to write, how to report, how to edit, but we're not necessarily taught the business side of journalism. So a lot of the work was really just building that foundation and really just making connections. I was fortunate enough to hire a few folks to kind of work with me. So we've been able to really scale our business. But, when I started a year ago, I was kind of strictly just doing social media, audience strategy, consulting for news organizations. Now I've kind of expanded to data analytics, to web development, to design, as well as just kind of increasing our footprint. So it's been really cool to kind of see different things and offer different services.
And what was that transition like, working with just, news organizations to now working with businesses as well? Or is it very similar?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think so many news organizations, as well as just non-news organizations, really want to do kind of storytelling around their brand. Whether they're a small nonprofit or a larger company, they really want to bring that human connection to their work. And I think as journalists, whether you're working in the journalism field or working with folks who are not in it, that kind of idea of storytelling doesn't change. So it's been really exciting to kind of apply a lot of those journalism elements to that work, because I think just the ability to write clean copy and to really tell a story about a person is something that really can't be replicated. And so it's been really exciting to bring those skills and that technique to kind of more corporate places as well.
And how do you structure your services? I know that you offer social media and, strategy, consulting. So how do you go about structuring those services and charging as well? The pay scale, the pay is going to be a little bit different than journalism.
Yes, that is such a great question. It's really interesting because I talked to a lot of folks who do this sort of work before I started my business. And a very common way that a lot of people do it is kind of packages, kind of like, we'll do 3 tweets for you a week and we'll do 2 reels and kind of things like that. And I understand that kind of package strategy, and I think it makes a lot of sense, but I think it's something that's a little bit harder to replicate in the journalism world. For example, my company, we do social media for some news organizations where we run their entire social media. So obviously 3 tweets would not be sufficient kind of for a weekly strategy. So typically what I do, just because a lot of the work is strategy and kind of jam-packed with other things, I've been kind of working primarily kind of on like retainer and project rates, which I find work a bit better than hourly rates. One big reason is because since we offer so many different things, whether that's social media, design, web development, we can offer our clients a lot of different things. So it felt kind of a little bit better to offer them kind of, you get 40 hours a month to kind of do any of these things instead of just kind of, restricting them to just social media. So it took me a while to kind of get to that point, because I think at first I was kind of in the hourly rate, but I think when clients start realizing like, oh, you can do this and you can do that, they really want you to do more, but then they're not necessarily prepared for the hourly rate at the end. So that's why I've kind of done less of an hourly rate and kind of more focus on kind of projects and kind of the big picture.
Right. And then the hourly rate, I think it's also easier to undercut yourself as well, because like you said, you may be able to, run through a project quickly, but you're not getting paid for that value that you're producing. So would you say, what's the makeup of your clients? Is it mostly news organizations that you're working with and small portion of businesses, or what's that look like?
Yeah, I would say it's probably around 50-50. We have a lot of journalism clients, but we also have a lot of journalism support clients. So kind of think of the organization and the foundations that either fund projects or that kind of do membership for news organizations. So we kind of have a lot of these news adjacent companies, that I like to call them, that still do a lot of work in the journalism industry, but it's more of a communications kind of strategic work, less than, just hard news. So I would say about 50-50. We also have clients who are in the wellness industry. We have clients who are, doctors, and we also have folks who we just kind of help with web development, whether they're kind of like a local business or even kind of like a law firm and similar things. But I think ultimately we always kind of come back to journalism since that's kind of really our bread and butter.
I want to say that you've accomplished a lot in this year. That's really exciting.
Yeah, it's been exciting.
Yes. And even being able to hire a team. What was that process like? How did you know, okay, it's time for me to hire someone? Or did you already start with a team?
Yeah, I started off alone. So I didn't have anyone kind of doing the work. But I think what really started to kind of affect me is that when you do a lot of consulting work, you're doing a lot of meetings, a lot, just kind of going over strategies and work. And it was hard for me to kind of balance all of the meetings and also kind of doing a lot of the social media day-to-day work for clients. So it kind of made sense to kind of hire someone to help with that work. But I think it was definitely a huge learning process for me. I kind of was under the assumption that you could just hire someone and start paying them and see what happens. But one person on my team is full-time and she doesn't live in Boston where I am. And I learned, you have to be registered as a foreign agent if you want to hire someone in a different state and figuring out all the taxes and things like that. So it was definitely a long process and a big learning process kind of around how to do a lot of that work. But I think it's been really great because it's helped us to be able to scale and do different types of ambitious projects that I don't think I would have been able to do if it was just me. We recently launched a social media management tool that we sell to our clients, as well as a data analytics tool. And I think just creating both of those, we would not have been able to do, had we not had the extra people.
Right. And I know that you're also thinking about the structure of your business, right? And an S Corp. So how did you come to that decision that that's the best model for you?
Yes, that's a great question. I actually really didn't know much about tax structures and kind of how all of that work happened. But, I actually saw an ad on Instagram, which is where I think we get all of our advice these days, about a company that essentially sets up LLCs and S Corps for freelancers specifically. It's called Collective. And I went to their website, had a call with kind of one of their associates, and I realized that, once you kind of hit a certain income, it makes sense to kind of form as an S Corp because, as a freelancer, you kind of have a lot of these personal taxes that you have to pay for being kind of an independent employee. And by being an S Corp, you essentially can put yourself on your own payroll as a business, which kind of eliminates a lot of those self-employment taxes. So it felt kind of strategically like a good way to do that. Also opens up, lots more opportunities to get, business credit cards and business funding and things like that. So it felt like a good idea to do, that kind of work.
I'm also curious, I don't think we've covered this yet, but that transition to leaving a full-time to starting your business, was there some overlap? Did you have some clients on the side at first, and then you felt comfortable to say, okay, now I can do this full-time? Or did you just say, okay, listen, I'm over this full-time job. Let's start this business?
Yes, that's a great question. A few years ago, I had a coworker who also worked at USC with me. We were both adjunct professors, and she had similarly done something where she kind of became a full-time travel and culture writer. And I had a call with her because I was just very curious of how she did it and really wanted to, make sure I wasn't doing anything, too crazy, but by kind of jumping into the freelance game. And something that she had recommended was to get some sort of anchor job, as she called it, which was really kind of some sort of consistent freelance job or kind of part-time job that can at least pay the majority of your bills. So no matter what happens, whether that's, slow business cuts, you always kind of have at least something to fall back on. And I think that's really a super, super important thing to think about when you're launching kind of a freelance business. So that's similarly what I did. I'd always been freelancing on the side with full-time jobs, but what kind of really led me to go full-time freelance was that I was able to get a part-time job doing kind of social media and audience work with a newsroom. So it's kind of enabled me to kind of have, a structured, consistent, every 2-week payroll job, but also, I have the time and the freedom to kind of do more work. And now that I have people, working for me, I've been able to kind of, be able to focus on that job and not necessarily have to do a lot of that day-to-day for my consulting business. Right now, I have a mix of people who are full-time employees as well as contractors. I have two people that are full-time, and then we have a few freelance contractors and things. So I would say total, there's probably about 5 of us. So that's designers, that's web developers who are contract, and then some of the full-time folks doing social media and audience strategy.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. So it's kind of gradual because you were already freelancing on the side. So it wasn't a complete, okay. Yeah. And I think that's helpful for people to know because it can be scary to just kind of quit your job and just go straight to the freelancing. How were you able to get those clients? So I know that you had the part-time, that was your anchor client. How were you able to then pursue other ones? What were your strategies for marketing?
Yeah, this year has been, I think, really lucky on my end because I really haven't done much marketing. I want to do more of that, this year. I think last year was a lot of just me posting on LinkedIn and Twitter saying, hey, I'm looking for work, and people taking me up on that. And a lot of people reaching out to me for services and for help, which I was really thankful for and appreciative of people who I had worked with who were referring me to other people. So that's one of my big goals, for this year is to be more ambitious and more aggressive on kind of the client front and really just kind of finding more projects for my team.
So I'm assuming since you manage social media accounts that you also manage a social media presence for yourself. I know you mentioned LinkedIn. Are you on other platforms as well?
Yes, I am on all of them. I'm a huge fan of, just emerging technology. And I try to join as many as possible, whether that's, the more niche ones like Blue Sky or Mastodon, as well as kind of, the Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagrams as well. I think using social media as a consumer gives me a lot of insights kind of on the strategy side of what someone would want to see when they're following a brand or an organization. So for me, it's really important to kind of maintain my own kind of presence so that I can really just get into the practice of really learning what it's like to be a consumer of a lot of this information.
So for me, I found, because I mentioned off camera that I had a content agency that I launched a few years back. And I know for me, one of the struggles was posting for myself. I was so focused on the actual client work that I wasn't focused a lot on promoting my actual services. So I wanted to see, was that a struggle for you, or you kind of were able to overcome that?
Yes, that's actually something that I started to realize about a few months ago. I was kind of in the same boat where it's like, I need to figure out how to market myself. So I actually hired a consultant to help me, the consultant to help the consultant. I found someone, I'm in a Boston Businesswoman, which is like a business group for women in the New England area. And I found a woman, Jackie, who has her own PR business. So she's a consultant and she helps, book clients on television for articles as sources, as well as just kind of help them with their image and headshots and all of that. And I actually started working with her earlier in the year, and she helped me with kind of a brand photo shoot. She's helped me kind of be able to get interviews and things. So that's kind of something that I think has really helped me, because I think I was in the same boat where my head's down all day, that I'm not necessarily thinking about that sort of work. So I think getting help from people can definitely be worth it.
And that's so important, because I think it's easy to fall into the mindset that, okay, I'm the consultant, I'm the coach, I should know how to do this. I shouldn't actually seek out that support, but we need that. We need to be able to do that and get mentors, which brings me to your Journalism Mentors was the organization that you founded. I love that concept. Can you talk about that as well?
Yes, that's what I like to call my passion project. I started doing that on the side when I worked at the LA Times, because for me, entering journalism felt very scary. I didn't want to be a journalist at first. I switched journalism as my major my senior year. I didn't know any journalists, and I found it really hard to break into the industry without a lot of connections. And when I was at the LA Times, I kind of realized, my internship at the New York Times opened up so many doors for me and gave me a lot of connections, but a lot of people don't get those opportunities, or people don't get the opportunity to go to J school. They might be at a community college or a university that doesn't have a journalism program. And really what my goal was is figuring out, how can we level the playing field for journalism and give people those connections and those opportunities before they enter the workforce. So the concept of journalism mentors really kind of came from the Digital Women Leaders mentoring network, which I think is now housed out of ONA, the Online News Association. And really the goal was, how can we find, people who work in the journalism industry who are really passionate about helping young people and connect them free of charge. So what I really like about the platform is that it's not a long-term commitment for the mentor or the mentee. You can talk to someone one time, or you can talk to them as long as you want. And it really just gives people an opportunity to talk to people about various experiences. And what I really like is that we have each person on the platform kind of mention information about what they can help people on, because I think a lot of times we think, oh, this person can help me do a nice cover letter or to write an article, which are important skills. But a lot of the things that we mentioned, things that mentors can help with are things like, being a mother in the newsroom, navigating burnout, being the only person of color in my newsroom, transitioning from a different career, kind of these sort of things that might not necessarily contribute to the actual function of your role, but really do matter. And that's kind of really what my goal was, is how can we really support people's entire selves as they enter the workforce instead of just, those hard journalism skills. So right now we have over 200 mentors on the site, places like the New York Times and the Post, really big national places, some local places like the Texas Tribune, the Dallas Morning News. So it's been really great to have a lot of people from a lot of different disciplines kind of just give up their time and help the next generation of journalists.
Really important work. And for our audience of freelance journalists, is that something that we could benefit from as well? Are there mentors who focus on freelancing?
Yes, absolutely. I always say, it's not only for, early journalists, it's just for anyone who needs that support. We have some people on there who have used it, where they transitioned into journalism and they wanted someone to talk to. So I think that's good. We have an entire list of folks who are freelancers as well, who can kind of offer that advice around pricing and strategy and connections and pitching and all of those things.
And are you looking for mentors for the site as well?
Yes, we are. There's an application open at journalismmentors.com. Something we're working on right now is really trying to revamp the entire website and really just provide more resources. Right now, the platform is run by myself and a friend of mine, Caitlin Ostroff, who works at the Wall Street Journal. And, it's kind of our side project. We're both extremely busy people. She's a reporter at the Journal. She also wrote a book recently on some of her reporting. So it's been something, that we've kind of done on the back burner for so long. So I think our goal this year is to really figure out how we can get, some donations to really advance the platform and just, continue to add more features. We've provided internships and job boards in the past. We're looking at doing webinars. So that's kind of our goal this year, is to figure out how we can scale the program.
And then you're also an adjunct professor.
Yes.
Yes. So what has that been like for you?
Yeah, it feels very full circle for me. I think I mentioned before that I did want to go into education when I started college. So being able to teach has kind of been my way to see that through, which has been really exciting. I've been an adjunct for about 5 years now. I started teaching at the University of Southern California when I was at the LA Times, and it was really great just being able to share a lot of the kind of industry learnings that I had with students. So it's been really exciting. And, my adjunct career has taken me from California as well now to Boston, where I also teach at Brandeis and a few other schools. And what I really appreciate about being in academia is that it gives me kind of a chance to really share these important insights with the next generation of journalists. I think we all know there's been so many debates in the journalism world about, the future of journalism education and is J school worth it, and just questions like that. And I think a lot of the classes I've been able to teach have been around social media, audience engagement, freelancing, pitching. And I think these are the skills that we really need to be teaching the next generation of journalists. So I'm excited to kind of share a lot of those opportunities to prepare students as much as I can to go out into the workforce.
I completely agree. It's such an important time to nurture the young people coming behind us. And this is also something that freelance journalists can think about as well. It's always good to know about options, right? So we talked about the consulting that freelancers can do for news organizations and businesses, and also the adjunct work. And what was the process like getting started as an adjunct?
Yeah, that was a really interesting process. I'd always thought that I needed a master's degree to get started or to even teach. And that is true, that is true for some schools, for, public schools, a lot of community colleges, but for private schools, that's not necessarily the case. A lot of journalism schools especially want to hire folks who have that industry experience to bring to their students. So someone at USC actually had reached out to me about the potential of teaching a class. And I was like, sign me up. I've never taught a class per se, but I did have, some experience teaching. I did do a little bit of teaching in undergrad since I was an education major for a bit. And I think, being in the classroom felt really natural and exciting to me. I did end up going back for my master's degree just because I really wanted to increase my understanding of digital audience strategy. But I think overall, it's a great opportunity, like you said, for adjuncts and freelancers to get involved, just because it's a really flexible job. And I think that fits really nicely for freelancers.
And at the same time, you're doing a lot. I feel like you're going to have to switch your brain off to do all the different tasks in one day that you need to do. And so how are you managing your time?
That is the biggest and most important question. Something that actually helped me that I actually learned from some fellow freelancers and a few Slack groups that I'm in is I actually got an executive assistant a few months ago to help me through a program called Squared Away, which basically pairs military spouses with folks who are just looking for an assistant. They're all virtual, so it's a win for a lot of military families because they're often moving, and it kind of gives them an opportunity to have that stable job no matter where in the country or the world that they're in. And it's been a really great experience because, my assistant will help book calls. She'll do kind of my calendar. She'll book flights and coordinate things for me. So I think that's been, a huge help. Just getting, things off the ground, making sure that I'm organized. So that's really been, I would say, the glue holding everything together.
Wow, that's my first time hearing about it. You said Squared Away?
Yes, Squared Away. It's really great. They have lots of different plans. So you could hire someone to just help you 10 hours a month, or you can kind of go up from there. So it's really flexible.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm definitely going to look into that one. Yeah. So can you talk about some obstacles that you've had to overcome? Maybe you thought that you could run your business in this way, and then you realized, okay, this is not the right fit for me. Any pitfalls or just any obstacles that you can share that can help guide the audience as they're continuing on their journeys?
Yes, so many. But, I see them as learning experiences more than anything. But I think one of the hardest things when you're starting a business, especially, is like figuring out, what the funding model looks like. I think for a lot of people who start, venture capitalist kind of finance businesses. It's kind of like you raise a bunch of money and then you kind of launch the product. Obviously, consulting is not necessarily an industry where you can do kind of that sort of fundraising. So a lot of the work that I did and a lot of the, fundraising and just starting my business was really just me bootstrapping my own business. And it's really costly and it's really expensive. And it's something, I've read so many statistics where most businesses die, in the first 5 years, and people don't really start seeing a profit for maybe, 5 years in. So I think just reminding yourself to kind of keep going is a really great way to kind of look at it. And I think one of the biggest, obstacles I faced is winning a client and then having them back out right before the contract is signed, or agreeing and then wanting to cut hours. I think all of those are big things I think about. I'm thinking about it, especially with the current climate. I think a lot of companies are kind of, buckling up for a recession. And typically when that happens, one of the first things that's cut is consulting services. They're usually not allowed to do that. And they kind of just want to focus on their team. So that's been really hard, is just kind of looking down the road and figuring out how to make the business kind of sustainable. So that's why I've been particularly looking at how to diversify the work that we do, which is why we've kind of entered this web development and graphic design sort of era as well, because that's just a really great way for us to have some differentiated revenue, as well as the social media management tool and the data analytics tool. Kind of selling those products as well can just kind of open up new revenue streams.
Well, that's the perfect segue into the money shot. Yay. Okay, so what's your one piece of advice for freelance journalists when it comes to money?
Yes, my one piece of advice is to ask for more of it. I think that's something that, freelancers always neglect to do. When you're a freelancer, as everyone probably knows, you're not getting any benefits. Your taxes are not being taken out. And all of those things are really important. And it's something that's really important to just account for when you're looking at rates. Most people I know charge too low, or when they give me a number, I always say, tack 30% onto that, because you're going to need that money for taxes. And being sure to ask your clients, for raises. A lot of times I have friends who have worked with the same 2 or 3 clients for years, and they've been paid, the same exact price, even though, the tools that they use to do that work might have gone up, or, their rent might have gone up. And I think in normal jobs, you're getting cost of living adjustments for full-time jobs, you're getting raises, you're getting promotions. And a lot of times freelancers can feel behind in that area. So that's why I always advocate for people to continue to ask for more money and to raise their rates, whether that's, on a yearly basis, or if they're really seeing success with the client, to just make sure that they're advocating for that. It's something that I try to be proactive with for even the contractors that I have, just kind of, telling them like, hey, we're going to increase, your hourly rate to this, or let's add on some more money, just so they get into the habit of, knowing that they should be advocating for themselves and asking for more.
Completely agree. That was an excellent response to the money shot. Thank you so much, Adriana, for taking the time to speak with us. I definitely want to stay in touch for sure. And I want to thank everyone who is listening and watching to this podcast. We will see you on the next episode.
Thank you.
The Freelance Journalism Podcast is a production of the Institute for Independent Journalists. Our mission is the emotional and financial sustainability of freelancers of color. Learn more about our work at theiij.com and use the code POD10 for a discount on our annual conference and other events open for registration now. That's POD number 10. And please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, or like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, or both. You can find our free webinars and other offerings on YouTube. And your recommendation and sharing with friends is the greatest compliment and helps us discover new listeners. Thanks for listening.